You know, for centuries, there's been this one core promise at the heart of our societies, that our kids will have it better than we did. But what if that's not true anymore? For the first time, really, since the Industrial Revolution, that promise is starting to look, well, broken. Today we're going to dig into why younger generations are actually ending up poorer than their parents, and what on earth that means for all of us.
There's this amazing old Greek proverb. It's all about planting trees for shade you'll never get to enjoy yourself. It perfectly sums up that idea of passing the torch, right? Building a better future for the next generation. It's kind of the whole point of a healthy society.
So, what happens when that promise breaks? When the people planting the trees are also the only ones who get to sit in the shade? That's kind of the world we're looking at now. We're facing this totally new reality where, for the first time in modern history, kids are not on track to be wealthier than their parents.
Yeah, a generational promise broken. And it's a super weird paradox, right? The world is like richer than it has ever been. But for so many young people today, the life their parents had, it just feels impossible. So how does that even work? How can a richer world create poorer generations? Well, let's get into it.
And look, this isn't just a vibe or a feeling, it's real. Think about the big milestones in life: finding a good stable job, buying a home, starting a family, saving for retirement. These used to be the standard playbook. Now, for a whole lot of people, they feel like impossible hurdles. And each hurdle you can't clear just makes the next one even harder. It's a huge domino effect, and it's messing with the entire economy.
So, where do we even begin to untangle this mess? Well, one of the biggest theories actually comes down to demographics. It's not just about money, it's about political power. The power that comes from just how many people were born in your generation.
A British politician, Lord David Willetts, had this really interesting idea. He basically said that in a democracy, being born into a huge generation, like the baby boomers, isn't a bug, it's a feature, a massive advantage, actually. You get this huge voting bloc that can shape policies to benefit, well, themselves for their entire lives.
And this timeline, this makes it crystal clear. You can literally track how policy changed as this massive generation got older. Back in the 60s, when they were young, they voted for things like free higher ed and social programs. Makes sense. But then, fast forward to the 80s and 90s, they're in their peak earning years. Suddenly, the focus shifts to lower income taxes and zoning laws that jack up their home values. And now, they're retiring. So the big political pushes are for pension protections and getting rid of wealth taxes. At every single stage of life, the political system has bent to their needs.
Okay, so all of this builds up to what is, let's be honest, probably the biggest single challenge for young people today: housing. The great housing divide.
Okay, let's compare home buying then versus now. A lot of people will say, yeah, houses were cheap back in the 80s, but look at the interest rates. They were like 15%. And sure, compared to 5% today, that sounds absolutely insane. But, and this is a huge but, just looking at the interest rate is totally missing the point. Because at a quick glance, the actual interest you pay each year might look kind of similar. So you think, okay, maybe it all evens out. But that's not the whole story, not even close. There's another part of your mortgage payment that changes everything.
And here it is, the real cost. See, you're not just paying interest, right? You also have to pay back the actual loan, the principal. And because house prices today are just so ridiculously high, the amount of principal you have to pay back every year is gigantic. So when you put it all together, the principal and the interest, the total cost to own a home today is literally double what it was in 1985, even with those low interest rates. It's crazy.
And the result of all this? This one number just says it all: 52%. A study back in 2020 found that over half of American adults aged 18 to 28 were still living with their parents. And get this, that was before the insane housing boom of the last few years. It's staggering. Okay, so things look pretty tough, but you always hear this one argument, right? The idea that this is all just a temporary problem that's going to fix itself. It's called the wealth transfer paradox. People always ask, but wait, won't the great wealth transfer just fix all this? The idea that all the money from older generations will just get passed down through inheritance and everything will be fine? Well, it's just not that simple. The timing of when that money arrives creates this huge problem. They call it the Prince Charles paradox. Think about it. He was in his 70s when he finally became king, and it's the same with inheritance. By the time most people get that money from their parents, they're in their 50s or 60s themselves. That money arrives way too late to do the things that actually kickstart an economy. Let's break down why this is so bad for the economy. 1. You need wealth when you're young for those big life milestones. 2. We're talking about buying your first house, starting a family, maybe launching a business. 3.
If you get a big pile of cash when you're 60, you're not doing any of that. You're just putting it into your retirement fund. So 4, the money just gets stuck in this loop, passed between older, less economically active people instead of fueling new growth. It's a cycle that just concentrates wealth at the top.
So, look, it's really easy to hear all this and just start blaming an entire generation. But honestly, that's not really the whole picture, and it's not very helpful. The reality is way more complicated than that.
It's not just one thing. I mean, think about the world the boomers grew up in. They had this long, unprecedented period of global peace. They had an insane amount of cheap energy from fossil fuels. And of course, you have the rise of a billionaire class that just warps all the statistics. It was kind of the perfect storm for building wealth, a moment in history that might just never happen again.
And we know it's not just about being a big generation, because we can look at a perfect counterexample. In China, the generation that's the same age as Western boomers is called the lost generation. They were a huge group of people too, but they grew up in a completely broken economy. And by the time China's economic boom finally happened, they were too old to really cash in. It's a powerful reminder that the economic environment you're in matters just as much as how many of you there are.
So, where does that leave us? It's a pretty huge question. For hundreds of years, our whole society, our whole economy has been built on this one simple idea. Things will get better for the next generation. But if that's not true anymore, if that engine is breaking down, then we have to ask ourselves a really tough question. What do we build instead?